90.3 WHPC now presents Law You Should Know. The law affects every aspect of our lives, our home, our jobs, and our recreational activities. Now, learn about the law and how to protect yourself against the loss of your liberty or property, and learn how to stand up for your rights and seek compensation when you have been wronged. Your host for Law You Should Know is attorney Kenneth J. Landau, a past dean of the Nassau Academy of Law, and frequently lectures to lawyers on ethics and avoiding problems with clients, and to the public on how to choose and use lawyers. This is Law You Should Know on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome to Law You Should Know. Today, our special guest is Elia Nichols, and she's an actress and a communication and public speaking consultant, and she's going to tell us how we can speak with greater success. Elia, welcome to Law You Should Know. What are some important things, and why did you get involved in the work of trying to help lawyers and business people and others become better speakers and communicators?
You know, I was getting my master's in acting, and when you are getting your master's, you often have to teach undergraduate classes, so you're required. And I was assigned the body language and communication class, and I was assigned the voice class, voice for business people. And so I had to teach at 22 years old people that were 21 and 20 years old. And I had to use all of these acting techniques that I had learned of how to project your voice on the stage and how to make your voice interesting and how to have vocal variety. And I used all of these body language techniques that I had learned for the stage. So how to literally get and keep audiences' attention, how to fill the space on the stage. I used all of these techniques and experience that I had as an actress to teach the normal people, right? The normal Joes, how to become better public speakers, basically. And I loved it. And so from basically the age of 22 on, I've always been an actress and a public speaking professor or coach. And in fact, even to this day, when I work with business people, politicians, lawyers, I always teach the same theater and voice and body language techniques that I taught when I was 22. I love it because I see immediate changes in people, in my clients. A lot of people think, oh gosh, I can't change my voice. Oh, I can't change my body language, right? Because we've been living in our bodies and in our voices as we have since basically we went through puberty, since we went through adolescence, since we became adults. And so it's very difficult to change those things, our bodies and our voices, but you can, and you actually can quite quickly if you're given the right tools and techniques. So that's why I do what I do. I think it massively, radically changes people and makes them into more confident and charismatic individuals and professionals.
And that will help them achieve greater success with maybe at work, with their colleagues, and with their potential clients. And do a better job for them, perhaps.
Absolutely.
So let's just...
And even in a personal level.
And right? A personal level, too. And they may not become... they don't have to change their personality, but you're going to help them take little steps to get where they want to be. So let's just talk about posture for a minute. What are some do's and don'ts when it comes to posture? And what are some little things that someone can think about and concentrate and try to put into their repertoire?
So the behaviors of a persuasive, confident posture would be openness. So open bodies, open shoulders, tall, lengthened bodies, anything that communicates openness. Strong eye contact is fundamental, strong and steady eye contact into people's eyes. A lot of times when people speak, they'll speak to people's foreheads or right above their heads. But that's not real eye contact, and that's not creating real rapport with your audience or with whoever you're speaking to. So it's fundamental to have good, strong eye contact and an open posture. What does that mean? That means no closure. So no closing your arms. That communicates hostility or lack of confidence or aggression, right? No collapsing down and, closing your shoulders. So openness and lengthening. Right? That's what we want in our posture. We also want our feet to be open because when your feet are open, you feel more grounded. So it's a way to trick your brain into feeling stronger and more confident. And what else do we want? We actually want hand gestures. So a lot of people get nervous when they get in front of an audience to use their hands, but hand gestures support your verbal messages. And they also make you a much more dynamic and interesting speaker. If you see people that never use their hands, there is a disconnect that's happening. And it's very difficult to be persuaded by someone who never uses their hands, who never uses their body, right? So these are some of the main positives and negatives of the posture of the body.
And if you're speaking to an audience, be it a jury or a lecturer, perhaps a judge, who's showing those negative postures you mentioned, how can you try to redirect that and connect with them?
One of the things that's most helpful in that situation is actually relaxation. So physical relaxation. Because it gives physical relaxation puts whoever you're speaking to at ease. So that's a moment when you would take any rigidity and tension out, right? So you literally that might be a moment when you kind of lean into your hip, you collapse into the side a little bit, you make yourself more relaxed. You might even bring yourself towards them a little bit so that you're involving them a bit more. And let's not forget about the vocal behaviors that are important in being persuasive and interesting, because that also has a lot to do about getting people on your side. So the vocal behaviors that communicate confidence and persuasion would be a wide pitch range. What does that mean? That means that you have a lot of notes in your voice, right? A lot of highs and lows and everything in between. And that vocal variety gets and keeps people's attention, but it's also just interesting to listen to. What else? Fluency of speaking. So no fillers, no ums, uhs. You don't sound confident when you use a lot of fillers. And it brings your credibility into question if you use a lot of fillers, the ums, right? With lawyers specifically, effective pauses are fundamental, right? The big pregnant or dramatic pause, because it gives the audience, the jurors, the judges time to think about that really important key message that you just delivered. But a lot of times the opposite happens, where you will be sitting in a courtroom and the lawyer will just keep spouting out information one after the other without taking an important dramatic pause. I think we fill space too often nowadays with sound. I think most of us are afraid of silence, but silence can be very effective because it gives the audience time to think about what you said, and we need that. So good dramatic pauses are fundamental. And probably the last thing is just obviously good articulation, meaning that I literally can understand what you're saying. Good articulation equals intelligence, high intelligent level, right? That's what it communicates. If you mumble all the time, we can't understand what you're saying, and then you're never going to be very effective.
And you also want to clearly state your points, and you want to, as you said, vary your tone. And perhaps stop after an important point to let it sit in, maybe lower or raise your voice just so it sinks in, and vary it a little bit to call attention to different points you want to make.
Exactly, as you just did, right? You varied your pitch, and it drew our ear to the words that you were saying because it was different from what it was before. In fact, the worst thing for a lawyer is to be monotone, right? To never raise or lower their pitch and their tone at all, because it puts the people to sleep, right? It's really hard to pay attention to somebody that's monotone. And it's certainly hard to motivate and persuade us.
And certainly if they're talking too fast and without a pause, it's very hard to pick up on what they're saying and what their point is. So it's okay to go slow, to stretch out words, to give them a chance to breathe and digest and process. What about the use of repetition of a key phrase or key point?
Repetition is fundamental, especially for memory, for remembering things. So they say that you need to repeat something 3 times for it to be remembered. So what does that mean? That means that when you're giving your opening and closing arguments, that when you're giving really key important information, you should repeat it 3 times so that the jury or the judge remembers it. And even if you're not a lawyer, if you're a business person, but you're delivering key messages, the most important messages should be repeated 3 times. it's also catchy. It's a form of rhetoric, which is just heightened language, right? To repeat something, it becomes more interesting. Winston Churchill has that really famous speech. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight in France. We shall fight. And he repeats, we shall fight about 14 times. That speech is powerful because of repetition.
And when lawyers speak, especially if they're talking to a jury or to an audience, perhaps they want to promote a service, it's very important to also be organized and have an opening to catch their interest, to mention the important points at least 3 times, and maybe to try to persuade them and call them to action and repeat those important selling points or important lines at the end of it.
Right, absolutely. So this is, you're very knowledgeable on this, Ken. There is actually what they call the psychology of persuasion, where they've studied what happens in a person's mind to be persuaded. So what path do they psychologically have to go down to decide, yes, I will vote for you. Yes, I will buy your product. Yes, I will agree with you on that decision and give you what you want in a courtroom, right? And if you follow this, it's made up of 5 steps. So the first step is exactly what you said. You have to get the audience's attention. So you have to start with what you call a hook, which hooks the audience and gets their attention. The second thing is you have to present the problem. So literally, what is the need? What is the problem here? And that should feel quite negative. And it should make the audience feel bad that there's a problem. There's something we're worried about and we need to solve it. And then you're supposed to present the solution. So you will make everybody feel better because the solution is obvious. And that's when the audience is starting to feel better about the situation. And then their 4th step is visualization. So you help the audience visualize what that solution looks like. And you can imagine what jurors and judges are going to start visualizing, right? So whether it's a certain settlement or whether it's letting, the person off and letting them be free or making them giving them the guilty verdict and they go to jail or whatever it is. And that's visualizing the solution. And the last and 5th step is call to action, which is what you just said, which is that you deliver what they are supposed to do. So now that I'm done, please go and do this. And you give them something that they can literally go and do, go and act upon. That is how you persuade someone.
And we'll continue
to vote.
And we'll just continue our discussion in just a moment. I want to remind our audience that we're talking with Elia Nichols. She's a professional actress, and she's also trained lawyers, business people, and others to speak with greater success, as she's giving us many tips about now. And you're listening to Law You Should Know here on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College. If you missed any portion of this program or you want to tell someone else about it, just go to the podcast at nccradio.org. Before you continue with your very important and helpful information, I know that you have information available to our listeners, and just tell us about that.
Sure. Probably the most helpful websites or social media I have are my Facebook pages and Instagram, because they have videos that are short and give you quick public speaking tips on how to be more persuasive, more confident, etc. And so the Facebook page, you can go to Elia Nichols Public Speaking. And my Instagram page is just Elia Nichols. And those are the 2 where you can find the videos and some really helpful tips. My website, just to give a background on who I am, how I can help everybody, and my contact information is www.elianichols.com. And so those are the best ways to
and I just want to give the spelling of your name so it's clear to everyone.
Thank you. It's Elia, and then Nichols is Nichols. And
that's an important point that you mentioned. Just make sure everything is clear, because if you were giving a program and they missed or misunderstood one portion of it, your message may be lost.
Absolutely, especially when you have difficult names. My first name, Elia, is not a common name. So if I don't pronounce it well, people get stuck on it. And the next 5 minutes, they think, what was her name? Right? They focus on that, which is not what I want them to be focusing on. So it's fundamental to articulate well.
And aside from that, what about the importance of visual aids? Are they help in certain presentations? Do they detract from the public speaking information?
It completely depends on the context. I find PowerPoints can really help you and really hurt you. You know, there's this expression now, death by PowerPoint. That version of using visual aids, like a PowerPoint, where it's all text and there's no images and there's, 100 words on a page, that is death by PowerPoint. It is impossible for an audience to read that many words while a speaker is talking. We're really good at multitasking, but we're not that good. Our brain can't listen and read at the same time. So your visual aids should support your verbal messages, but they shouldn't take the place or substitute the verbal messages. Great visual aids stimulate our curiosity. They stimulate our creativity. They put images in our minds that help us understand better. Those are good visual aids. And in fact, in the courtroom, criminal lawyers, trial lawyers bring in visual aids that help the jury and the judge understand the case better. But that's not just more words, right? It's a different way of learning. So that's how I view visual aids. They're supposed to support your verbal messages. You're the expert. And so your voice, your body language, and your words all of those three should communicate the message.
And if there's
your visual aid helps that.
And if there's a picture of an accident scene or a list of some important terms, it helps communicate that to the jury and helps them understand your presentation.
Absolutely. I was speaking with a personal injury lawyer the other day, and we were on Zoom, and behind him there was a leg. There was literally like a skeleton, but it was just the leg with the muscles and everything. And I said, why do you have a leg behind you? And he said, well, I'm a personal injury lawyer, and the case I'm working on right now, a man got injured in a car accident. His leg got hurt. The best way to explain this to the jury and the judge is by just having this leg, right? It was obviously a fake leg, but it was that visual aid was the most helpful way for him to explain what had happened in this incident. I agree. It's very hard to explain that with words. And
explaining what the scene of an accident looked like, a juror or judge may pick up so much more from the scene as long as it agrees with your description. If it doesn't jive with your description, then your credibility may be challenged, or the defect.
Absolutely.
Or and the injuries. If someone had scars, they may have healed up, but if you have a picture of them shortly after the accident, that's going to be very effective in addition to the witness describing it, or the brace they had to wear, or the pins that are in their body.
Right. Absolutely. As is the story that you as the lawyer tell of that accident, right? And of the healing or lack of healing afterwards. So the verbal and nonverbal and the visual aids must all go together. They all make up the argument, right? That's going to eventually persuade your audience.
And they just help demonstrate what you're talking about. They bring the point home. And what about transitions? If you're communicating, you're going from one point in your legal message to another, or you're giving a persuasive speech, what's a good way to leave the point you're making and transition to the next one?
Well, the whole point of transitions is to naturally bring the brain on a journey, right, from one point to another. So you want to use connecting words, like things like, and therefore, and for this reason, right? So these are natural transition words, but also we want to think of the most natural way to connect literally one argument to another. So I think these are things that need to be thought of beforehand. I actually find this the most important part of preparation, because it is easy to think of your argument in an outline form. Okay, first I'm going to talk about this, and then I'm going to talk about that, and then this. But the hardest part of successfully delivering an argument is really the transitions. So it's mentally finding my passage from one step to another. That, in my opinion, is the real preparation. So you have to find your own natural way to go from one subject matter to another, to then deliver it effectively to the audience. So that is where the most preparation should lie. From that point, your audience can just sit back and listen effortlessly because you have found your own mental and organization structure, and then therefore it's easier for them to follow it as well. But transitions should be short. It should be one sentence or 3 to 4 words that naturally lead the audience. Otherwise, we get lost.
And what are some points to make at the end of the presentation? How do you to bring the point home, convince a juror or a judge or a client to decide in your favor?
Repetition is key. So the rules of a conclusion are this. The conclusion is only supposed to last 1/6 of the actual argument. You should tell your audience that you are about to conclude. So you should warn your audience before we finish today or in my final closing statement, right? You should actually warn the audience you're about to conclude, but then you have a short amount of time to actually conclude because otherwise you've broken your promise to the audience. And it's important to keep promises. Otherwise the audience won't trust you. So you give them a statement that says, I'm about to conclude. You then respect the length of time, 1/6 of your full argument. And then it's great to review the key points. This is part of the repetition, right? That I'm going to repeat the key points so that I remind the audience the most important things that they need to remember, the main messages. And then the last statement, it's always wonderful if it's memorable. So something that it's like we've started the speech with a hook, with an attention getter, and with an attention getter as well, and in a memorable way, that the audience leaves thoughtful and involved and engaged. So those are generally the rules to a great conclusion. Do you have any, I'm curious, Ken, you've been a practicing lawyer for years. Do you have any anecdotes or tips regarding conclusions that you've been involved in?
Well, I think it's just a theme that the jury can live with, they can agree to. You're bringing the point home after you've told them about A and B and C, the accident, the hospitalization, the medical treatment, a partial recovery and where they are now, and that all the jury can do is, why they should find in your favor, why they can provide compensation to you, and help to bring you to a better place.
Which is the call to action.
The call to action.
Right? That's the call to action.
And in some jurisdictions, you can
telling them what you need them to do.
And well, that no amount of money can fully compensate, but it just gives them some hope and some form of compensation. What are some of the other things? I just want to remind our audience again that we're talking to Elia Nichols, and she's a professional speech coach and an actress. And as you've heard, she has many ideas on how to go from good to great and how to speak with greater success. And really, in your experience, I mean, you probably deal with a whole spectrum for people, for those that are afraid to utter 2 words and others who want to go from good to great and almost be a professional performer. And you can help each of those people get to a better place?
Absolutely. I actually had 2 calls today that were complete opposites on the spectrum. One that's terrified of public speaking, absolutely terrified, and yet their job requires them to do it. And one that loves it and feels that she excels at it, but she just wants more polish. And she knows that she can improve in little ways, both with her voice and her body language. So absolutely, there's all different types out there. Regarding fear, though, I mean, they say that fear is actually that public speaking is the number 1 fear of people around the world. They literally say that. So it's common. It's completely normal and natural to be afraid of speaking in front of other people. The biggest advice I can give regarding that is, first of all, that to not be afraid of it, to not be scared that when you start to feel the butterflies in your stomach, to not get freaked out by that, because it's actually your body giving you what it needs to succeed in that situation. So the butterflies, the sweating, however it manifests itself, is just adrenaline. And we need adrenaline to do a good job. So there are, breath exercises that can help you with fear. There's practice makes perfect helps you with fear, right? The more you practice, the better you do with it. But there are so many techniques that can help you deal with that fear.
And if you lose your thought or you mess up a word or a point, you just apologize to the audience or just kind of move on and they may not even be aware of it?
I actually think it's better not to bring too much attention to it. I say smile. You do a small smile, you collect your thoughts, Look up, left, or right so that you can communicate. I'm thinking. I'm reflective. I'm thinking. Collect your thoughts. When you've got your words, come back at the audience with eye contact and a lot of energy, and they will forgive and forget. But if you stumble and apologize and show how flustered you've gotten, then they will remember and, punish you for it for the rest of your existence, right? We don't need that. So I say smile, fight, collect yourself, and move on with energy. And people will absolutely say, she's human. Everybody messes up.
And Elia, just give us your website again and your contact information.
Sure. It's elianichols.com is my website. My Facebook page is Elia Nichols Public Speaking. And my Instagram is Elia Nichols.
And as you mentioned before, there are valuable tips there, and it's EliaNichols. In our final moment, what other do's and don'ts do you have for lawyers and others, young people or not as young, trying to improve their public speaking and just reducing their fear and anxiety about it?
The number one thing is that you need to have passion and enthusiasm and conviction when you speak. And this does not matter what profession you are in. Because what they've found is that you can break all of the body language and voice rules, but if you do so with passion and conviction and enthusiasm, no one cares. Because that is what is going to interest and engage an audience the most. So if you're going to do your job, please do it with enthusiasm and passion. Now, one thing that's interesting is they've studied conviction. What is conviction? How do you actually be, how can you be convincing? And they've literally studied that conviction is when your verbal and nonverbal messages communicate the same thing. That's when you're convincing. So if your body's not matching your voice and vice versa, and if your body and voice aren't matching your verbal messages, then people aren't going to believe you. And your credibility goes down, and you're going to be much less effective and persuasive. So work on that. Work on your messages all matching. The second thing is it's very important to be prepared. Lawyers must be prepared. They cannot read off of their notes and off of their script. It makes you look like you don't know what you're doing and that you didn't prepare well and do a good job, right? And the last thing is monotony. So monotony with body language and monotony with voice. It just equals boring. And there's no way to get people excited and believe you and listen to you and give you what you want if you are monotone. So those are my three biggest comments.
Okay. I'd like to thank you for all your valuable information today. And just a reminder, it's Elia Nichols, Nichols. And you can find her at those various places you mentioned. If you missed any part of this program or you'd like to tell someone else about it, just go to the WHPC website, nccradio.org, and please join us next week at this same time on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College, for another program on Law You Should Know.